we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. We're live here in Manchester. Today was the big speech of Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary. I'll be joined tonight by Sir Ian Duncan Smith, Nadeem Zahawi. I'm going to ask, will any actions really come from that speech today? And the other big question is there a message that goes out to the country here from Manchester? If there is, I've no idea what it is, but no doubt Sir Ian and Nadeem can make me aware of it because I can't work out what it is. First, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. The top story today is that the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has warned of a future hurricane of mass migration into the UK in her speech to the Tory party conference in Manchester today. Ms Braverman says that as well as stopping illegal migrants from coming to the UK, she'll also make sure that legal migration is held at reasonable levels. GB News presenter Nigel Farage criticised the speech, saying the government was out of touch with ordinary voters. Ms Braverman, though, says the Conservative Party will do whatever it takes to deter the boats.
The Legal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda. But all of this is ultimately a question of political will. And be under no illusion, we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats and deter bogus asylum seekers.
Well, there was a heckler that interrupted the Home Secretary today, but she said later on in the afternoon that he should be forgiven and let back into conference. In these exclusive images obtained by GB News, Andrew Boff, who was led out of the conference, is a Conservative London Assembly member, had to leave the hall after saying the Home Secretary's anti-trans policies amounted to what he called homophobia. Now, the Prime Minister has been telling GB News today he's the person to deliver change to Britain. Rishi Sunak defended his record on illegal migration, saying for the first time ever the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France is down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on policy.
You've got Keir Starmer, who, no one knows what he stands for, flip-flops left and right. The country can see through that. That's not leadership. What I'm offering is different. I know people want change. I'm the person to deliver it because we're going to do politics differently. You saw that on net zero. You'll see that this week. That's what you get from a Conservative government.
Well, we're expecting the Prime Minister to confirm in his Conservative Party speech tomorrow in Manchester exactly what his position is on the future of the northern section of the HS2 rail project. Businesses are said to be demanding immediate clarity. Following reports, Rishi Sunak may be planning to scrap the line from Birmingham to Manchester. It's understood the Prime Minister will be announcing spending on other infrastructure projects for the north in his forthcoming speech. And lastly, foreign prisons could be used to help combat the crisis of Britain's overcrowded jails. The government's considering renting prison cells overseas to tackle UK prison overcrowding. Speaking at the Tory party conference, the Justice Secretary Alex Chalk proposed the move, with spare male prisoner capacity in the UK now down to 258 places. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, it was a very highly anticipated speech. Other than Rishi's speech tomorrow, in which we may or may not find out what's happening with HS2, something that has overhung this conference in the most extraordinary and I think terribly mismanaged way. But Suella Braverman's speech was heavily anticipated by the members. Stop the boats has become one of the absolutely key pledges from this government. And Suella Braverman, and I've got to give her credit for one thing, her public speaking style is much, much better than it used to be. She had a certain confidence on the stage this afternoon, and here was her really big line.
The Illegal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda. But all of this is ultimately a question of political will. And be under no illusion, we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats and deter bogus asylum seekers.
So there we are. Be under no illusion. We will do whatever it takes. The trouble is, we heard that from Priti Patel, we heard it from Boris Johnson, we're hearing it, of course, from Rishi Sunak, and now stated very clearly by Suella Braverman. But was there actually any substance in the speech? Was there any real positive message? And the big one that everyone was waiting for was, of course, the ECHR, yes, the European Convention on Human Rights. I'm joined by GB News reporter Charlie Peters, who listened to the speech and has been discussing this with Tory close insiders shortly afterwards. How did the faithful take this speech?
Well, it was a very personal speech, I thought. The opening, when she said, you know, the winds that took my family to Britain, the winds of migration, have now become a hurricane, really tying back to that personal story. She criticised the Labour Party for saying that they were not doing enough to oppose the dereliction of national sovereignty and the degradation of our borders, which was expected, to criticise Labour in that way.
Yeah.
What was more interesting, in fact, was that she went on to criticise her own party, saying that too many in the Conservatives were squeamish when it came to dealing with the issue of migration. She also said that many feared being smeared as racist, and that's why they didn't speak up. She said that she would do anything to deal with this problem. And in that discussion on the legalistic issue, she said that the Human Rights Act, she branded it as the Criminal Rights Act, saying that it turbocharged issues whereby bogus asylum claims rattled on for many years and that criminals were not able to be deported. But it wasn't just what she did speak about. As you've mentioned, it was what was omitted from the speech.
Well, that was my feeling too.
The European Convention of Human Rights, many people speaking to GB News this afternoon saying that they were expecting a comment on that after it was hyped so much in the week ahead of conference. And of course, we've heard about this split in the cabinet between those who are in favour of leaving the convention and those who are more shy, perhaps even squeamish on the issue. Now, allies close to Ms Braverman told me this afternoon that they obviously couldn't make a speech on the ECHR considering the current political storm, and they said that the comments about the Human Rights Act were the next best thing. At the end of the speech, beyond migration, there was also a reference to sex issues and dealing with prisoners. And that's an interesting speech, and many commentators will be interested in how they deal with prisoners changing their gender or changing their name to escape restrictions.
Well, certainly after Scotland, that is a very real political issue. But this is the big one. I mean, frankly, what she said around the Human Rights Act, it's all a bit mealy-mouthed, isn't it? Because the Human Rights Act, of course, was the incorporation of ECHR into British law. Before I go to Sir Ian and get his reaction to this, I was very struck today that she came across, frankly, as a toothless Tory attack puppy. It's all well and good playing up the rhetoric, but we've heard that again and again and again. I didn't see a single solution in this speech to illegal immigration, and she barely touched on it. She barely touched on legal immigration, where the population of this country is exploding, despite the fact we have the Brexit powers to control the numbers. I thought the whole thing was very poor, very disappointing, and it plays in, for me, to a bigger theme. You see, I can't see a big message coming out of Manchester to the country. I went out earlier and spoke to delegates to ask them, what did they see as the big message? I'm with Richard here, Conservative Party member, man that cares hugely, I think, about the party. Richard, what is the big message out of this conference?
I think it's one of stability. It has been quite disappointing in some ways because I wanted a more radical agenda to be outlined.
Well, the H2, the trains knocked me a little bit because it was going well and now it's been cancelled.
We don't know.
Oh, OK.
We're going to find out in Rishi's speech tomorrow.
I think the party is back, actually. The party, Rishi is the stability.
Rishi's sort of life goal, his 12 months of doing stability is over, and now it's the time to sort of get a bit of grit.
What's the big message? I know. Everybody struggles to answer that.
Rishi Sunak said it was a record attendance. It doesn't seem to be that busy. But I've been to loads of great fringe meetings and CDO meetings.
Yeah, so isn't this the point? The energy has not been in the hall, it's been on the fringe, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
The Conservatives are trying to tell us that they are put together and they've got somewhere going. They're going somewhere in the long run. They're not just here for the short term.
The big message is that people in the country want clarity, they want answers.
Clarity. There's an absence of it. I'm joined by the Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green and, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party, Sir Ian Duncan Smith. Did you get the point, Ian, what I was asking the delegates? I mean, maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe you can tell me there is a big standout message coming from this conference to the country. If so, please help me.
Well, I think if they get this right, tomorrow should be the moment when he categorises what he plans to do and hopefully does it in a simple way. I mean, I would simply say, from here until the next election, priority is to get government off people's backs, on their side, give them the freedoms that are necessary, get rid of the woke nonsense, cut taxes, get this economy moving, and get the boats stopped.
OK, now we're told one of the big speeches will be about smoking, that nobody born after 2009 will be able to buy a packet of cigarettes. So I could be, in my mid-70s, going into, the local corner shop, having to produce ID to prove I wasn't born before 2009. The point I'm making is, you say get government off the backs of people. We've had 13 years of government getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Now, listen, we put this in context. We've had the huge COVID attack, which cost us lots of money. We had to spend taxpayers' money, borrow money, and we've had this crisis over Ukraine, which, by the way, you see from this, I think we have to support them. So that has added to the cost burden. I understand all of that. But there are lots of things that we still do and spend money on in the bureaucracy of government that we don't need to do. When I came in, we had to cut quite a lot of the cost of that, and we did so. And I think the government's got to do that to make way for what we consider returning people their money, because we should only spend their money when we absolutely have to. So the key bit about all of this is, and this is where I believe that Rishi Sunak is in the right place himself instinctively, which is, by and large, he is somebody that wants to get the costs down. He set himself a pledge to do that, but he has to articulate that in a way that says, I pledge to you, so we will reduce the burden of taxation before the next election.
But the Chancellor,
get off your backs.
But hang on, Ian, the Chancellor, in a 15-minute, somewhat robotic, I thought, performance yesterday.
Very quick,
very quick indeed. I mean, there was no hint of taxes being reduced.
The thing is, I don't think they want to make a pledge to cut taxes, but they know that they have to reduce the burden of taxation. It's a fact of life. There's no escaping it. We have the highest tax rate that we've had since the Second World War.
I agree with all of that.
The government knows that.
I agree with all of that.
They've got to get a message shaped around getting off your back.
What I'm hearing,
reducing taxes.
What I'm hearing in Manchester is Suella Braverman, you, telling us what's wrong. And we all know what's wrong.
Yeah.
But you've been in power for 13 years. I mean, do you agree with me that until Rishi's speech, as yet, there is no big standout message?
Yeah, and that's the point about the message tomorrow. It is where we're going to be over the next 10, 12 months. So this speech is the most important speech he will make probably in his life.
Yeah.
Because this hinges where the government goes. And I think what we have to understand also from this speech, if I'm going to be a little bit presumptive, is that I think he needs to let people in. Who is Rishi Sunak? I instinctively think that he is actually much more in the mould of reducing burdens, getting regulations down, and governing less, but giving people more responsibility. I think instinctively in all my conversations with him, that's where he is. He needs to let the public know that this is the guy that's going to try and make this better, easier, and safer for them. The vote stuff is categorical about.
I'm going to come back.
We'll come back.
We come because at the end of those Voxes I did, the woman said clarity.
Agree.
She wants clarity, and this message of stability. I mean, it doesn't impress the general public at all.
No.
We need clarity in America. Now, Suella, who is very much cut in the IDS cloth politically, you know, ardent Brexiteer, free speech advocate, many things that I would find, you know, politically attractive about Suella. And yet she did the same thing again today, didn't she? She told us what was wrong. People won't speak out because they fear being called racist. We've been hearing this stuff for years. Why, oh why, Ian, did she not address the ECHR? Every person in that hall expected this issue to be addressed. She didn't do it.
Well, I'm hoping tomorrow a lot of this is being held back. Because you often know that prime ministers stop cabinet ministers from saying things because they want to say them in a context that develops the key message. So I think I'd be surprised if Rishi Sunak doesn't say something about this. It's one of the big elephants in the room. The truth is, we have a pledge to stop the votes. He made that pledge categorically. I agree that it's got to happen. The only way you're going to stop that is to deter people from making that terribly risky, dangerous route and paying these ghastly traffickers to do it.
Yeah.
To do that, it's got to be the balance of economics versus risk has got to be very clear.
You've got to deport people.
That's the point. So the first flight that leaves with the people on it, that's when the public will go, aha, I get it. This is what's going to happen. So his commitment to do that is already there. The question is, how do you deliver that commitment? Now, we're not alone by any chance. Across Europe, lots of governments are now saying ECHR is a problem. It's not fit for purpose.
I mean, this issue...
Italy is an absolute crisis.
This issue could destroy...
This is not just us.
This could destroy the European Union
absolutely.
as an issue. It may destroy the EU before we're brave enough to even act on it.
Well, the key question is, through Brexit, we're out of the European Union, so we have no obligations on that. We have to make the decisions for ourselves.
Should we leave the ECHR?
Well, there are lots of mechanisms about leaving which aren't also complete leaving. So, for example, you've got the legislation that Tony Blair brought through, which gives direct application to the courts. That's one of the areas you could immediately look at. Stop direct application.
Our judges will always go back to ECHR.
Yeah, but they can't if they're not got direct application. That's
why not just make it simple?
Well, there's one. No,
clarity.
I'm
Clarity. Why not just leave it?
You could leave it, and you could rejoin tomorrow, knocking out all the areas that you don't like, because everybody else did that.
Fine.
France did. So there's
why,
lots of ways of doing it.
Isn't the truth of it that your parliamentary party overwhelmingly want to stay part of it?
Well, I understand human rights is very important, and we want to uphold human rights. We were the first to do it. We still have a proud record of doing it. But we need to get the difference between human rights, saving people who are being persecuted, being trafficked, etc. That's laudable, that's right. But we also have a responsibility to get control of what is a migration system being abused by the traffickers. That means we have to take the action that's necessary. There's 3 or 4 ways of doing it, but I hope tomorrow he will be clear.
Well,
if this gets overturned,
we'll wait and see.
There is stage 2 to go to, and we will take that stage.
We'll wait and see.
He has to be clear about that.
We'll wait and see. But I thought, for Suella, given the whole pitch, given the whole political image that she gives, not to even talk about. She could have hinted, couldn't she? You'll hear more tomorrow. Didn't mention it. Very disappointing.
Well, there's an old Teddy Roosevelt had a line which I've always think is important. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. And the big stick tomorrow has to be where he was.
Well, we'll wait and see. Now, here we are. Party management. Never easy. You're a former party leader. I am of a smaller party. Things often go wrong at conferences. We know about all that. How can we be in Manchester, of all the cities in the UK, and we have a string of cabinet ministers, the Prime Minister, refusing to answer the question whether the extension from Birmingham to Manchester of HS2 is going ahead? This is actually clouding out the potential of any other clear messages getting through. Isn't this a complete mess?
I think there was a mistake earlier on, and somehow there was some suggestion, whether it came out deliberately or not, I don't know, from Downing Street, that this was being discussed and looked at. Yeah. It was always going to then, as we're going to Manchester, going to be the big issue that's running through it.
A leak, possibly?
I think more likely the leak, because I know if I know the Prime Minister at all, I know he likes to get this closed and sorted, then make announcements, so he won't have liked that at all. And that has, you're right, it has dominated. But I think the real issue here, I mean, I'm one of those that never thought that you would build up the north by umbilically linking it again to London. Yeah. What is necessary, and here's where I hope the government will go, is to say to those northern great cities, we want you to develop as an alternative to London in many ways. And to do that, we need to invest money, more money than's going to road, rail, communications, etc. And the way to do that is if we have to stop the link, HS2, at Birmingham or wherever it happens to be, a proportion of that money that we save, significant proportion, will go to you guys to make this northern powerhouse work.
And to link up Leeds, and Liverpool,
Leeds,
and Hull,
Newcastle,
and all of it, actually.
The big cities, make them together the powerhouse that competes with London and becomes a destination. Now that...
I would agree with that.
Would work, and I think many of the mayors would run with that too.
Are we going to hear that?
Well, I hope so. You know, I don't...
I bet we don't.
I'm not in...
I bet we don't.
Well, he may not make... You know, people are saying he's going to make an announcement about the HS2. I'd be surprised if he makes it tomorrow.
Well, I tell you what, if they walk away from here having not answered the HS2 question, then the whole conference will be a failure. Quick final thought. Any hope of winning the next election?
Yeah, I actually... You know, you talked about the Vox Pop. I've been doing a lot of talking to people, and the mood I'm getting out of this conference is more up than I had expected it to be. And I think one of the reasons is because Rishi Sunak's had to be very cautious and get the inflation down, all the rest of it. All those targets are important. But a week and a half ago, he took a big decision over the net zero.
And it worked.
And he said, I'm going to lift this from 2030 to 2035, gas and oil, everything is, get that back, because I'm not going to have you beaten in cost terms all the way to net zero. It's too difficult at the moment. It's too expensive. We'll do it in a pace that suits you. That was a very big moment, because there'll be a lot of people around him saying, oh, don't do this.
Yeah.
It did two things. It begins to define who he really is. And to my point earlier on, Rishi is by and large skeptic about the idea that you can tax and spend your way out of difficulty. So this is very important. The second bit of it is, it brought Labour to the fight. They said, we'll reverse it.
Yeah.
That means now we are on ground that the Tories should
clear
be clear.
blue water.
Well, this is the point. So I have a real instinct about Rishi.
All right, let's see.
This is where he instinctively lies.
Let's see.
And he will deliver on it at some point.
I have to say, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, it's marvellous. After 30 years in Parliament, you still exude optimism for the next election. I think it's rather wonderful. In a moment, a special exclusive report from Lampedusa, the implications of which will play out in the English Channel very, very shortly. Back with you in 2 minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Suella Braverman talked about a hurricane of migration, in particular coming from North Africa, and nowhere has been more acutely affected over the last couple of weeks than the Italian island of Lampedusa. GB News' Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, has been to Lampedusa and produced for us this exclusive report.
A week after more than 11,000 migrants arrived on this tiny Italian island, we watched as the final batch of 101, mainly young men from sub-Saharan Africa, left to board a ferry to the Italian mainland. Authorities here took advantage of several days of bad weather in the Med to clear the decks ahead of the next surge of migrant arrivals. It is a seemingly never-ending cycle in the mass movement of people across this sea. Lampedusa's geographical location, closer to North Africa than Italy, puts it on the front line of Europe's growing migrant crisis. But many of the 6,000 residents here say they feel forgotten, overwhelmed by the constant arrivals, with little concrete action from Europe's politicians. The Italian Red Cross run the main migrant reception centre on Lampedusa. They've been drafting in additional support to deal with the next surge in arrivals. The chaos of the last surge still fresh in their minds, where at one point 7,000 people were crammed into this compound, many clashing with police as they tried to leave. Serena Cornelia said the volunteers here felt powerless to help.
More difficult to give the support, but we try to give food, give kit, give psychological support and health support. So we have tried to take care of all the people inside the center.
There are real concerns here on Lampedusa that the tourist trade, the lifeblood of this island community, could begin to dry up if a solution isn't found to the crisis. You don't have to look far for evidence of its impact here. Near the entrance to the port, a migrant boat lies beached on the rocks, a gaping hole in its hull. The personal belongings of its human cargo hanging over the sides. Inside the harbour, dozens of other migrant boats that made it here in recent days lie tied up, awaiting removal. Many still full of tire inner tubes, used by the migrants as makeshift life jackets. Further along the quayside, fishermen unload the last of their catch for local restaurants. The winds that have kept the migrant boats away for several days have also forced these fishermen back to port. Giacomo Migno says the migrant boats are severely impacting their livelihood.
So when we encounter a migrant boat, we call the authorities. They tell us to wait, not to do anything. Then the Coast Guard arrives, or the police patrol. But it means we're financially ruined. It's a mess. Our work is badly affected. It's too much.
Unlike the vast majority of African migrants who want to head to mainland Europe, Talla Diouf has made a life for himself here. The Senegalese national says the huge flow of fellow migrants onto this island is simply unsustainable.
The government must find a solution as quickly as possible because the island has 6,300 inhabitants. Then, if 11,000 of my brothers come, it's a big problem. We have to find a solution quickly because nothing will be done until next summer.
For now, these migrants are headed for the mainland. But this is not just an Italian problem, it's a Europe-wide crisis. Many here will eventually head north, some to the coast of northwest France and onto another boat, this time across the English Channel. Mark White, GB News on Lampedusa.
Well, it's a very powerful, but I would suggest quite disturbing package. You can call it a hurricane, you can call it an invasion. It's happening. The EU have put in place their own asylum policy, which basically says if you cross the Med, set foot on the EU soil, you can stay. And equally, we are still paying the price for that. The German president last week said we are at breaking point with this, saying that Germany simply can't take any more. Italy, desperate to get the rest of the EU to help. And into this row, Elon Musk says, why are German subsidized non-governmental organization boats in the Mediterranean effectively helping, ferrying, taxiing migrants into Lampedusa, whilst at the same time Germany doesn't want any more? It is a complete political and social disaster. That report, what is going on in Lampedusa, is what's happening in the English Channel, but on a much, much bigger, and I think a much more disturbing scale. The point about Brexit, for me, was we would free ourselves from EU stupidity, and yet through our lack of courage, we simply haven't done so. In a moment, I'll talk about Donald Trump in court yesterday, and why the charges against him are clearly, totally and utterly fraudulent.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the What the Farage moment today, and this is extraordinary. Donald Trump is back in court. Nothing new there, I hear you say. He's being accused by New York prosecutors of playing up the value of his real estate to borrow big money from banks off the back of it and to make $100 million profit in the process. Now, to be clear, all the money that he borrowed from his banks has been paid back in full. But here's the farce of it. Far from overvaluing his properties by between $1 and $2 billion, the judge has valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. Believe me, I've been there many, many times. I was out last night with a real estate guy who said he'd pay $500 million for it. It is the best piece of real estate on the whole east coast of America and would probably sell for in excess of $1 billion. And this shows you how utterly corrupt, completely bent the US judicial system has been in its desperate attempt to do down Donald Trump. This is a total, complete fraud. Now, on to a better story. This is about Tesco's in Waltham Abbey. It's about shoplifters running rampant, running riot, nicking 3,000 quid's worth of goods. And yet, a group called TMI, a group of private investigators, former cops, actually managed to catch people in the act. And are they dangerous vigilantes, these people? You can see them storming the car. Are they dangerous vigilantes acting outside the law? Or is this what we need to do to reverse this horrendous wave of lawlessness and shoplifting? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by David McKelvey. David, it's an amazing story, but you guys, as civilians, storming a car, it's potentially quite dangerous, isn't it?
It is dangerous, and the people in the car were extremely violent, and had to be subdued and had to be handcuffed. I mean, unfortunately for them, the team, the prolific crimes team, who go out on a daily basis and catch shoplifters and we prosecute them, were on a training day for handcuff training. And so they were sitting, just on the break, they were sitting down having their lunch when these people, openly looted the Tesco store in front of them. And obviously at that stage, we couldn't just stand by and watch this take place. So we intervened.
Right, but David, you were prepared for this, yeah? You've been looking out for this.
No. No, we don't operate in Waltham Abbey. It's not one of the areas we operate. We operate across many other areas, but not Waltham Abbey. It was a training day. We were doing handcuff training, and literally this unfolded in front of the chaps as they were having their lunch.
David, well done you, very successful. Do you believe there is a way we can stop this shoplifting wave, which is now almost endemic in many of the big stores and even small shops in our country?
Absolutely, and we have proved it over the past 2 years in every single area that we police, that we have detectives and we have our bobbies. You have seen significant reductions in crime and particularly retail crime, significant reductions. And it's only about old-fashioned core policing. It's about having people there on the street people who attend, deal with the incidents, gather the evidence, and then the one thing we do and nobody else does is we prosecute those people in the criminal courts.
And that's the key, isn't it? Prosecution is now the key.
It's the only thing, Nigel, that works. You can invest in CCTV, body-worn cameras, you can do everything. The only thing that makes any difference is putting these people before a court and convicting them and ensuring that the court gives them the appropriate sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David McKelvey, great story. Please keep up the good work. There we are, a positive message. Something can be done. Now, I wonder whether there are positive messages coming out of Manchester. There are certainly no big messages that I've been able to detect. Maybe we'll get one tomorrow from Rishi Sunak. I somehow doubt it. But what are Joe Public saying? James Johnson, number 10 pollster for Theresa May, and of course, JL Partners. James, two things really. Secondly, the immigration polling in the Sunday Times this week, really, really interesting. But first, I did some Voxes earlier, and the last woman I spoke to said, we want clarity. Is there any in the minds of voters?
There's not. I mean, the number one word that they associate most with the Conservative Party at the moment is useless. It's not just, you usually get something like, you know, rich, corrupt, nasty, but it's not even that. You know, you can be sort of nasty and effective and still get elected, but you can't be nasty and useless. And that's the problem for the Conservative Party at the moment. Now, and that's what Rishi Sunak will be hoping to change tomorrow. And, you know, he's got some time. He's still got 12 months or so till the next election, but clarity is the absolute key. That's what voters are asking for. They don't just want, you know, they don't want Rishi Sunak to be their best friend. They don't think he's going to be in touch with them. There's no point Rishi Sunak trying to do that.
Nice bloke, clever, decent, but that's not good enough.
They're not going to think he's, you know, their best mate, and he shouldn't try and do that. He's got to be strong and the guy with a plan and the guy who's, you know, going to level with them and give the tough decisions. If he can do that with some standout policies tomorrow, he might be able to turn it around. But there's no doubt he's really not anywhere on their radar for that at the moment.
No, and the HS2 thing, of course, just shows indecision and muddle. We'll find out more. To me, James, one of the big elephants in the room at this conference has been legal immigration. There's Suella, you know, banging the drum. We're going to stop the boats, and we've heard it all before. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But it's legal immigration, isn't it? It's the rapidly rising population. It's the impact on housing, on schools, on GP appointments. You produced some polling last week on this that was extraordinary, off the back of some of the words Suella had said.
Yeah, so what we did, I'll bring it up so I can cite it properly. I mean, what we did is we polled a number of extracts from the speech, because when it came out, I think you might remember, the commentariat and a lot of people on Twitter said, this is horrifying.
She said mass immigration, mass illegal immigration, posed an existential crisis for the West.
She did, and the public agree with it. 66% of the public agree with that statement. The most agreed of any of the statements that we polled, only 11% disagreed.
So 66% agreed with her, 11% disagreed, and yet in Westminster and amongst the mainstream media, those numbers are reversed.
It's a different world. It's a different world, and I think this is one of the, you know, the real challenges for the Conservative Party at the moment, is that they'll say these things and, you know, they'll get jumped on by the press and mauled, but actually it could also be quite good for them, because it means all these things are getting a lot of attention, and to most people sat at home, these feel like statements of the obvious that Suella Braverman's making. Causes a huge hullabaloo on Twitter, but actually, you know, resonates with them a lot. And, you know, we asked also, multiculturalism has failed, agree or disagree. More people agree with that than disagreed. All the other lines in the speech, not one of them was disagreed with. So it is a different world between Westminster and the public on this issue.
And yet the Tory party here in Manchester not really picking up on any of this.
So I think Suella Braverman probably is, and I imagine Rishi Sunak actually is more likely to think that. I think one of the things that one of Rishi Sunak's senior members of the staff said to me yesterday was, Rishi Sunak cannot understand, coming from a family of legal immigrants, why you should be able to do this. The problem for the Conservatives is they now need to put those words into action. And the small votes numbers are going to be absolutely key in determining the next election.
James Johnson confirming there what you know at home, which is that Westminster may as well be a completely foreign country. They're miles away. James, thank you. In a moment, I'm going to speak to Nadeem Zahawi. Going to ask him, can the Tories really fight back and win the next election?
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I am joined by the Conservative Member of Parliament for Stratford-on-Avon, and of course he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, Chairman of the Conservative Party, an entrepreneur. We might even call you, Nadeem Zahawi, a self-made man, an aspirant.
Bless you.
We were chatting in the break before we came on that you joined this party back in the 80s, when it was all about aspiration, wasn't it? It didn't matter what your religion was, what your race was, what your class was. You know, Mrs. Thatcher believed if you had the ability, you worked hard, had a bit of luck, you could do well. You did do rather well, didn't you?
Very much so. I was very lucky and blessed. I remember my mum saying, you know, son, the country that's adopted us has got a grocer's daughter as Prime Minister.
Yeah, because you come from Iraq, haven't you?
Right, absolutely right. Yeah, no, it's remarkable. Actually, in many ways, if you reflect on that and you look at the cabinet today, okay, some of them weren't born when the great lady was Prime Minister, but you look, you know, James Cleverly, Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, even Rishi Sunak himself, right? It is a product of that era of, if you're aspirational, if you work hard, you're going to do well in this country.
Yeah, but Rishi Sunak went to Winchester College and I went to Oxford, and I mean, you know,
I hear you.
I mean, you know, you didn't have those privileges.
No, but
is this party today about aspiration? Is it about small business? Is it about enterprise? Because I can't see it.
So I tell you what I think it's about, and I think Rishi is beginning to cut through on this, that he will make the difficult decisions, long-term decisions, that people will see that he's on their side. I don't think people care what your background is. What they care about is, are you on their side? You know, in their moments of challenge and need, he's on their side. You look at what he did on furlough, right? You look at what he did actually on gas assets in the North Sea. Right. You look at what he did on net zero.
Well, hang on a second. I mean, we're still taxing gas and oil companies 75%.
But he went up against huge opposition from Labour and others and said, actually, these assets are important to us. Instead of us having to import more gas from abroad, right, we're going to explore our own
not
gas.
Before time, and I grant you that.
Net zero.
I grant you that.
Right. We'll still deliver by 2050, but we don't do things that are going to hurt hard-pressed people in the short term for a soundbite.
Those things make sense to me, and that they were pragmatic changes.
100%.
The targets on petrol and diesel cars were completely unachievable. It was pragmatic. But here's my thing. Going around today, and I've been here a couple of days now, 3 days, met a lot of people, and I keep asking people, what's the big message from this conference? Now, I grant you, it might come tomorrow from the Prime Minister, but at the moment, there isn't one, is there?
I disagree. I think what he's really trying to get across is, look, it's not about a soundbite. It's not about, Starmer just sort of really swaying in the wind, whichever way it blows. Flip-flopping. It's about, I will be honest with you, I'll tell you what I think works, and I'm going to deliver against it. Right? And he's beginning, you look at what's happening, his whole stall was to say, we've got to halve inflation, right? We've got to deal with my 5 promises: grow the economy.
Not much chance of that.
No, it's hard. I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster in the Cabinet Office as we was working with Suella. Right, it's hard, but it's beginning to work. Look at what we did with the Albanians. The moment the message got across that you'll be out of here in 24 hours if you come illegally, right? The numbers drop.
Yeah, but
the moment we get those planes off to
loads have come and stayed already, and many have got involved in running drugs gangs in our big cities. I mean, it's not been good.
Well, look, you're right. It's been a difficult one, and it is probably one of the toughest things to deal with. Why? Because we now are in a world where the legislation of old, post Second World War, no longer applies.
So should we just... I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
We understand why the ECHR was set up. We understand British lawyers, and Churchill was very for it, and it was to stop the abuses against the Jews and others. But isn't it time we just left it?
I would much rather see us reform. Why? As I travel around the world, this is a problem for pretty much every major economy in the world. The problem, and the Home Secretary dealt with it today, is that we're in a world now of mass migration, mass movement of humanity, right? So it's a problem for all of us. We have to begin to think about, why is it that we can reform our own legislation to modernize it, right, as needs be, but we can't touch this. I think reform is what it's about.
I think that's exactly what Labour will say next week.
No, they won't.
You see, no, pretty much they will. See, here's the point, Nadeem Zahawi. Most people who vote are busy people. They've got jobs, mortgages, a Labrador, 2.3 kids. They're busy living their lives. And you look back on the great political leaders. Thatcher was one. The ladies not for turning. We knew she was going to stick with where we were, tough though it was. Blair, education. These big, standout, clear messages. We knew. I mean, and they're the 2 great leaders I think we've seen in our lifetimes. But to tell me that Rishi is going to give us good long-term management because he's an intelligent, good chap. People want really clear messages. To say you're going to reform the ECHR, no one believes it.
Well, nothing's off the table for this government.
No.
He will stop the boats. I'm confident he'll manage to do that. He will make sure the economy grows. You're seeing Rishi Sunak at his best when he says, listen, of course I've got to deliver net zero by 2050, but I'm not going to do it by lying to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. We don't have the charging infrastructure.
So more of that.
Right? More of Rishi behaving like an engineer would, i.e. focusing on outcomes. Let me deliver for you and show you. I think that will play well.
Interesting. So do you think there's a possibility of a 92-style shock at the general election?
Absolutely do.
You do?
100%. I'll tell you why, right? And I ran a polling organisation.
Right. Absolutely.
So if you look at all the research, there isn't a single policy that the voters identify with Keir Starmer and are for it. They're just annoyed with us. right? We've had a difficult time.
They think you're useless.
Right. And we've had a tough year, right? No doubt about that. And there's no point flanneling your viewers and telling them, no, it's all fine, everything is good. It's not. But Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair. What will happen, I think,
that is true.
What will happen is people will start seeing, actually, this guy Rishi, he says stuff that is not always comfortable, but at least tells me the truth, and then he fixes stuff. And I think that will bode well.
And what happens to Nadeem Zahawi? The guy that was the entrepreneur, that became the great success, that rose to big offices, that had a crack at the main job, had a few problems along the way, a few ups and downs, a little bit of financial issues here and there. What do you do next?
Secretary of State for Stratford-on-Avon. When I was selected in 2010, I said to them, my ambition is to be your Secretary of State, to be your champion in Parliament. I'm patron of the Adam Smith Institute, fighting for smaller government, better outcomes, a dynamic economy.
So you're a campaigner?
I'm a campaigner. I've got a campaign that I've been running for the last 6 months. When the time is right, I want to see Rishi and Jeremy Hunt abolish inheritance tax. It is an unfair
That's your latest
tax.
big campaign.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No. Well, I tell you what, a lot of GB viewers will agree with that. Nadeem, thank you.
Yes, you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now, very odd today, wasn't it? I mean, there was speculation. Would I even be allowed inside the building? Even though I was working for GB News, would the Tories be so hostile to me because they resent me for, UKIP and putting candidates up against them in the past? And wow, I've been so welcomed here that actually the Prime Minister didn't say no, that whether I could join the party or not. Now, I've got to tell you folks at home, I've no intention of joining the party at this stage. It would need to reform radically, but do you think they'd have me?
Why not? If you come and join us...
Hesitancy there.
Not at all. If you come and join us on this journey of speaking truth to power,
all right,
saying to people that look, these are things we need to fix.
Well, let's see what the Jacob Rees-Mogg has to say to that. Jacob, good evening. Would the party really have me?
My Lord Farage, I think the party should welcome you in with open arms, ideally with a peerage. And actually, I think it's your duty to join the party. You can help us. You can help us ensure that we get the best possible Brexit and that we deal with the migration crisis and that we cut taxes. Nigel, you are a proper Tory. You should come home.
Oh, I love it. They're all so wonderfully optimistic, this mob. They really are. It's all too much. Let's get the weather.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather bulletin. We have some pretty wet weather to come across northern parts through the next 24 hours, but further south it is a drier picture, and that's because of this area of high pressure that's going to build and lead to a quieter spell as we go through the rest of the week for southern areas. Further north and tightly packed isobars show that it's blustery, and we have the weather system that's going to push in as we go through tonight and into Wednesday. Some heavy rain affecting particularly western parts of Scotland through the next 24 hours or so, but even some of that spreading further eastwards. We are going to see increasing amounts of cloud across parts of England and Wales, but in the east, where we have some clear skies, rural spots could just about dip into single figures. As we go through Wednesday then, a north-south split, quite cloudy and wet across many northern areas, particularly western, southwestern parts of Scotland. Here, rainfall totals could build up. There could be a little bit of localised flooding and also some disruption to travel. Further north across Scotland, it's going to be a showery day and also a few showers across parts of England and Wales, but also some bright sunny spells, and with winds a little bit lighter than they have been recently and temperatures getting to highs around 19-20, it should feel relatively warm. As we go through Thursday then, staying largely dry across more southeastern parts of the UK, but notice some wet weather that will push in across parts of Northern Ireland, into Wales, Northern England, and also across...
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa,